sitting in the living room of Chris and Ellis, and we're going to interview our honoured guests on their background in dance in general, but particularly in quadrilles. And to do this interview, we have our expert, Paul Cooper, our former dancer who did dance with English Quadrille and many other notable groups.
Former dancer
with English Quadrille, that's probably what I said. And who has known both Chris and Ellis for at least 35 years, you say? Yes, it's a very long time, 36 years. So that's the party here, and we're going to attempt to extract all sorts of interesting information out of our guests. It'll be this evening when this goes live, Chris and Ellis Rogers. So I think we begin. Paul, you have some leading questions to pose to our guests this evening.
Indeed. So, hello to Chris and Ellis. So I'm thrilled to be here today in that nice rainy Orpington. But yeah, you guys have been pioneers within our community, and gosh, you must have an awful lot of anecdotes and tales that you can tell. But I was just wondering if you could give us a little summary of what you've done in early dance over the years. What kind of things have you been involved with?
Well, we early dance, as far as we was concerned, when I was much younger, was American stuff, because American square dancing was in the age when I was the sort of age I started dancing, 16, 17, and I was helping to run a youth club in those times, and looking for things to amuse the people in the youth club. We used to bring in Patrick Children Shaw of the English Folk Dance and Song Society, and he gave a few lessons to the club, and I got the interest, and then went to Cecil Sharp House and started, as I thought at that time, using English folk dancing. And each year they had a festival at the Albert Hall, and they had a special group of dancers who they interviewed to make sure they got some good dancers and put on a show at the Albert Hall. And sometimes they called in specialists who would introduce what we would now call real historical dancing. I think their first expert was Belinda Quarry, wasn't it?
Yes.
And she came down and got it from the ballet point of view and introduced a few dancers from the ballet company that she knew. And we did a few 18th century stuff at the Albert Hall, and that was our real introduction to dancing. But the big switch over came when we were told that we were getting too old to be a demonstration team for the English Folk Dance and Song Society. I mean, we were getting on, we were 35, weren't we, Christine?
You were 35, I was a lot younger.
And looked even younger. And so we thought we'd look around for something for our old age, and advertised by the Dolmetsch Society was the dancers of Shakespeare's time. So we thought we'd go along to this, and we thought it'd be all easy stuff, posturing, lots of bows, and found out it nearly killed us because they wanted us to dance galliards and things that were twice as more effort than we ever used in folk dancing. But that is where we caught the bug and kept going back to the various summer schools that were run by the Dolmetsch Society then. And in the time on these courses they referred us original books, mainly French, about early dance, and I looked at these books, and being a bit of a investigator in some way, we decided that we didn't agree with some of the things we were being taught by Belinda and by Dolmetsch, so we started doing our own research, and that involved learning to read French dance books, which was really hard. And that's how we got into the dancing, really, into the early historical dance, through the Dolmetsch Historical Dance Society. Later on, we went to summer schools with Peggy Dixon, who ran the None Such early dance group, and they had a different view on the same dances, and it's always nice to be found in the end to go to several dancers who teach slightly different ways, and then try and read the original books and compare them and see whether they actually, one, agree with the books, and again whether they agree with other dancing masters. And in the end, I suppose you decide that you would learn the style of the teacher you like best. So if you're going to be a teacher, it's always best to be very friendly to your pupils, otherwise they won't come back again. So that's how we got into that dancing. The more we danced, the more we realised that it only went up to the end of the 18th century. Nobody was teaching stuff later than the 18th century, until we found ourselves teaching fairly regularly for the Oxford Historical Dance Society. And their leader was Diana Porteous, who was played the clarinet, and there was a what do they call these teachers that go around teaching at different schools? Yes, that's one. And she said, well, next Christmas on our Christmas course, we want you to teach Victorian dancing. And Chris and I looked at one another and said, well, we don't know anything about Victorian. And she said, you've got 3 months to learn. She was rather like that, Diana.
We called it the Iron Mouse.
The Iron Mouse, yeah. So we went to such a sharp house and spent the next 3 months practically camped out in the library to learn Victorian dance, and got into quadrilles and cotillions from that sort of thing. And that was the beginning, the hard work as far as we're concerned. Up to then we'd done it for our enjoyment, but from then on it was for learning enough to teach others. So that's the answer of how we got started on this sort of thing. We had that problem in Japan. Well, on the last day of a visit to Japan, where I was teaching, they decided, well, we've arranged for you to give a lecture at the Tokyo Museum of Cultural Museum. We were to show you the museum in the morning, and then in the afternoon we want you to give in the lecture hall there this lecture. And we said, what about? And they said, well, European dance rhythms in the 19th century. So I said, fine. And then we went to lunch. And during lunch, they had a bunch of thieves broke into the museum, switched all the lights off, and pinched all the stuff I'd taken to play the music, all my records, all the tapes, all the notes and illustrations we had in our luggage, and they'd thieved the lot, took the lot. So there I was. I had 2 hours to think up a lecture without any music and any dancers. And there was the lecture hall in the Museum of Culture is quite a big place, you know, it was going to be full. So I was standing there wondering what the devil to do. And an American couple walked up and said, we understand you've got a problem. I said, you could say that. And he said, well, I have this tape. Is it any good to you? It's a 1/4-inch cassette. And it was done at American dances at the time of the War of Separation from England, War of Independence. And it was all tunes that we knew in different rhythms of waltz, jig, reel, hornpipe. And I sat down with this tape and played it through and made notes of every tune and the number of bars in each tune and what the rhythms were, and rewrote in my head the whole lecture using the music from this 1/4-inch tape. And then I said, well, look, what about the dances you've rehearsed? Oh, well, don't worry about that. So I got up and started to teach, and I got the audience to do the demonstrations themselves. And it worked like a charm, because where I would have had big gaps in my talk, having only just music, I was able to get the audience to get up and dance sessions which filled in the time. and it was a success. We got quite a cheer at the end. That was about the most nerve-wracking things that ever happened. I don't know whether Barbara's had the same effect, but sometimes when we're teaching ball, they suddenly ask you to do something you just haven't the faintest preparation for at all. And again in Japan, they said, well, you give a lecture. And I said, well, do they understand English? He said, here and there.
They will nod politely.
So I said, well, what do you want to do? He
Smile
said, well,
right.
dictate the whole of the lecture that I want to give about this again, about 19th century dance in Europe. And I have something, type it overnight, and then I have it copied, and every person in the audience will have the script in Japanese as well as in English. So they can have it in front of them and listen to you talking and hear half of it and get the translation from the thing in front of them. Incredibly organised, the Japanese, so when they say they're going to do something like that. But again, you say you have to join, connect with the audience. And I said, I'm going to do this. Well, rehearse saying good morning to the audience in Japanese to start off with, so they had to all stand up and say it back in English, so that was a good start. And then halfway through I said, there's no humour in this so far, it's all factual. So I mentioned the problem of the change of dress in crinolines and the making frames, and that some inventor invented a frame which was pneumatic tubes, like the inner tube of a bicycle tyre, which you blew up with a pair of bellows to make the frame for the dress. And I mimed this on the stage, being blown up, you know, and then I said when they sat down there, I'm doing this vow, and there was such a silly night, and I did mime, you know, and then they were all laughing. I thought, oh, I've got away with this.
The Japanese, we found, listen very carefully and they learn very well visually.
Yes,
which
they've
was
got that
useful for
photographic
Ellis.
minds, haven't they?
Useful for Ellis. I mean, he's been to Japan 4 or 5 times. I've only been a couple of times. But, when he was over there at the same time as Richard Powell's, he had a class of 1,300, and they were quiet, weren't they?
Yes.
And it was in the Olympic swimming pool, had been boarded over, and they were rehearsing for a ball in the evening. And
1,300.
Yeah.
That's extraordinary.
Richard or Ellis?
Ellis.
Ellis.
How would you divide them up? This is quadrilles or other dances?
Yes, it was the dancers mainly, and a polka mazurka, Varsoviana, and something else I taught. But with a class of 1,300, you've got to rely an awful lot on their being sympathetic to you. But I think they've been taught by various other teachers from Europe and other places, so they're quite used to this sort of thing happening. But their photographic memory for watching you dance can have a bad side, because if you make a mistake yourself, then that is built into their way of doing it for the rest of their life.
That story is of the top lady calling the dance, and if she calls something ridiculous, everybody has to do it already. And make a fool of her.
We had this problem in Canada where we were teaching, and I taught one dance, I think it was a playful dance for a set of 3 couples, and just for a laugh, halfway through it, the band changed the music to quite modern sort of thing, and we put in the sort of black and white minstrel show, hand movements, you know, like this. And some years later we saw something on YouTube, and they were still doing that particular. So you have to be careful.
But you think they thought it might be real? Did they think it might be real?
I don't think so. No, they
just like
fun.
But they thought it was an added touch to the dance. Very good.
Talking about things going wrong, when we went to Canada, we were going to teach in a university which was air conditioned and beautifully set up. The day before we got there, they cut through the main electricity cable that supplied the whole university. And the temperature was up in the 90s Fahrenheit. So it was, it was incredible. So they decided there was no one in the town that both of us could teach together. So they separated us. And Chris had to teach 16th century dance in our dance hall. And I was teaching the history of English folk dance in another dance hall. So you have to be prepared for everything, even for going out to lunch. I was teaching in Morris, didn't I?
Or knee breeches.
White stockings, black knee breeches, and a white shirt. And I walked out in the middle of this Canadian town in this outfit and got quite a few street funny looks from the men, but everybody was incredibly polite, nobody criticised me. They just thought, oh, he's a weirdo, I suppose.
No, one woman said to me, gee, your husband's a snappy dresser. Wow. We got caught out in the same sort of way. The first time we went to Japan, we were running a short course, 5 days in Tokyo, and Professor Ikema, who arranged for us to go out there, Ken, called for short, said to us, the uncle of the emperor is a very keen dancer and he's going to come and attend your class. So we were a bit worried about this, but he was a very nice chap. He said, he was 71 and he'd recently had to give up ice dance, but he still did all the other sorts of dancing, and he was looking forward to adding this. So I danced the minuet with him, which was nice. But he said, I'll take you out to lunch. We only have an hour, no time to change, no time for anything, quick, downstairs into the car. He had a partner he brought with him, not his wife, she was young and very beautiful. And she drove the car, which was a little sports car with a dicky seat in the back. So there was the prince and his partner who was driving, and three of us, Professor Ikema, who fortunately is very small, Ellis and I, shoved in the back. And we drove to what is quite simply, I think, the best restaurant in Japan, in the middle of somewhere like Kensington Gardens. And pulled up outside the restaurant, and they rolled out a red carpet right to the door of the car. And Prince Mikasa got out, his partner got out, and the three of us in the back burst out and fell all over the place. Walked up to the door, and the prince had stopped to talk to somebody, so we all stood back, and he said, no, go in. So we went through the door, and the restaurant was packed with men in beautiful Western suits and women in full Japanese outfits. The red carpet went straight through the middle of all of them, and it was lined with waiters who were bowing. They did, I don't know if it's changed now, but they did bow all the time in Japan. We got quite used to it. I was wearing Marks and Spencer's trousers, a homemade top, and my hair tied up in a scarf. Ellis was wearing brown shoes, white stockings, black knee breeches, a white shirt, open-necked and no tie, and an anorak that had split a couple of days before and was stuck up with septum.
So this now has been taken as typical English dress, and ever since the Japanese have adopted it as the way to...
Well, I decided, what the hell, I'm an Englishman. And led the procession down the centre of the red carpet, with all the guests and the waiters bowing.
Well, the waiters were bowing. The guests were all looking to see what was going on.
They were muttering. Somebody once asked, what do you think they were saying? I said, well, they're saying, who's that Japanese bloke with Ellis Rogers?
Well, there must be very few people, Chris, who can claim to have danced a minuet with the uncle of the Emperor of Japan.
guess you've been involved in early dance. Certainly you've all seen the formation, the foundation of the early dance circle, but you've been involved with Dolmetsch, the Historical Dance Society, for many years as well. I guess you've seen an awful lot come. And
Yes, well, do you know Simon Evans?
I do not.
Well, he was the person who produced symphony concerts. He was a commission orchestras to places like the Albert Hall and things like that. And he got fed up with listening after hundreds of minuets, because every symphony had a minuet movement in it, and he didn't know the dance. So he put an advertisement in the papers, asked anybody who's interested in minuets and early dance, would they contact him? And this is where he started forming the early dance circle. He held this big meeting at the festival hall, and we went along, so we became
Founder members.
founder members of the society.
Barbara was another founder member.
Yeah, so Simon was member number 1, and we're number 2 and 3.
Was I 3? Am I 3? Well, I never knew that.
You might be. Oh,
You must have been
About
Russell,
46 and 6, I think.
You were late paying your subscription.
Probably.
And Chris, you were its first chairman, weren't you? No,
Chairman?
Simon.
No,
Yes, Simon.
Simon.
The second
I
one.
was chairman only for a very short time. It's not
Simon must have been the first.
not my area of expertise.
Simon,
You're the archivist. You're supposed to know these things, aren't you?
Simon was quite a moving person.
He
in those days.
was.
You
He
don't
was.
hear about him now.
He was
But
an
he-
impresario, wasn't he? That was
Yes.
his
He
sort of role.
formed the Covent Garden Minuet Company to dance the dancers he wanted to see, to go in with his music. And he had a strong presence in America. There, where he also held concerts. And while he was in America, he met a group of folk dance enthusiasts who started doing early dance, and he decided he wanted a bit more teaching for them. So he invited me to go over to America to teach his group in America. So this was our first teaching outside England. But
I
What
didn't
did
go.
you teach them?
I couldn't go, I was working. He went over, but he was willing to pay for me as well. And he wanted Ellis to teach a 2-hour class.
yes.
All that
and-
expense for 2
yeah, and keep
hours.
us over there for a weekend because they were doing a Victorian weekend in Wilmington in North Carolina.
And as it happened, on the plane,
On the plane where we met the members of the Covent Garden Minuet Company, as you might expect, but all the girls' husbands or boyfriends were members of the Sherlock Holmes Society. So he decided they would write a play that they would give him in Wilmington about Sherlock Holmes. And they wrote this play called Mr. Watson, I Don't Give a Damn. And it turned out to be a play where the Wilmington local government, state government, was going to apply back to Queen Victoria to rejoin the English Empire. So this was political dynamite, and they worked it into a play which involved breaking into the detectives breaking into a speakeasy because prohibition of alcohol sales were supposed to be prohibited at that time. And when they broke in, they had girl can-can dancers dancing to entertain the beach drinkers. And I went along to one of the rehearsals that they were holding, and I was in the audience, slowly going to sleep, when one of the girls dancers, Beverly, came up.
Beverly Griffith. Beverly Griffith, I think.
Beverly Griffith, yes, came up and said, "We are short of another dancer, she's ill or something. Do you think you could come and work during the rehearsal, take her place?" So I said, "Yeah, anything." So I went down to help, and they got me doing this sort of can-can dance. And when it came to the evening performance, they again came out to me and said, "She's still ill. Can we dress you up as a girl and have you as a can-can dancer in our play?" And being like an idiot, believing every word they said, I went along and got dressed in a long golden wig, fishnet stockings, bare legs, can-can sort of panties and a short skirt on, and they had me dancing in front of this full theatre of strictly religious-based audience.
So this plot had all been carefully planned beforehand, so that they would. So rather than had they confronted with you right at the beginning that you might have declined. So,
I didn't find out I was conned until I picked up a programme and found I was in the programme.